Paweł Trela, Hoegert Technic brand ambassador, a licensed rally driver and Polish drift champion, a constructor and a lecturer at university. On a daily basis, he runs a company that prepares cars for motorsport, where he also participates actively in the process of designing and creating vehicles specially designed for competition. His most famous design is Maybach, the only drifting Opel GT in Europe, with which he takes part in the competition. Paweł Trela is also a consultant for Hoegert Technic brand in the field of designing and testing new products. Cooperating with the brand, he builds its credibility, and he also co-creates its image and supports communication. Hi, we have received a lot of inquiries from you about the cooling system. So today I will try to bring this system closer to you. I will show you which radiators we use, which hoses we use, how everything is arranged in the car, so that it is safe and it works best. Sports cars are much more strenuous than their street counterparts. They generate much more power and also much more heat. And of course we have to deal with it somehow. Therefore, we will show you how it works exactly in a drift car, which has one more problem, because it usually drives on the track not straight ahead, but at some angle. It just drives sideways. As a consequence, it is very difficult to direct the air so that it goes exactly where we want, so to radiators, some hoses and other heat receivers. And this is what we will focus on today. I have also prepared a few elements for you, just different radiators, totally custom, competitive. We will show you what the serial ones look like, how they differ. The same goes for the silicone and aluminum hoses, what we use when building the entire system for the whole car, both for the cooling system and the oil cooling system. We will talk about all of this, and I will dismantle Opel. As you have probably noticed, we do not have a water radiator here. This one is in the back of the car. However, we have several different ones. Among other things, starting with the first intercooler, 10 cm core thickness, so in fact, one of the thicker ones. Because usually 76 mm, 60 mm, within these limits, are used in such projects. How do they differ from those which we normally use in our cars? Of course, first of all, the size. This is, for example, a relatively popular sports intercooler. Originally, it is, for example, the size or even this size. So this one works much better. This is the first difference. The second difference is in the core structure itself, so all these fins which are inside. The same way here from outside, as we can see the shape of this fin and the shape of this fin. That is a different story. This one will work much better. It will thin the air much better, it will cool the air much better. Regarding the oil coolers, which I also have in my car, there are 3 at the front. 1 oil cooler for power steering, 2 for engine oil. Actually, the same principle, we have different sizes of such coolers. Here I have the most popular size, it is probably 25 rows. Square, so it is nice, you can easily attach a fan to it, so that the largest possible surface of this cooler can be cooled down. A similar principle when it comes to the intercooler, of course, they differ in size. They differ in the shape of these fins as well as fins inside. I will show you in a moment. Here I have a relatively basic cooler, and here this year's higher model, where you can see that there is a different shape of these aluminum lamellas. Same as it will be here. You can take a look inside, it looks completely different. There is a different flow, this oil flows better, faster. It can simply cool it all down faster and lower the temperature. Of course, the question is, as we have such a radiator, how to actually connect it to the car. The answer is very simple. We have so-called sandwich plates. So it is the stand that we mount between the oil filter and the engine block. Now if we want, for example, only the oil after heating to go to the radiator, we put one with the thermostat. There is a piston, a spring, a thermostat very similar in structure, similar to a water thermostat used normally in a car. The set temperature is reached and the valve opens. Then the oil goes to the radiator, this oil cools down. We mostly use the one that lets out 100% of the oil to the radiator. Because it is a sieve, the first may be not a problem, but an important condition for these cars in a competitive sports to work well, flawlessly and without any problems. Eventually, they are very similar to these, but here is the empty space and then, as if automatically, some of the oil goes back to the engine, some of the oil goes to the radiator. Well, we do not use this one because, you know, if the oil flows through some fins, it is easier to go back to the engine right away than to go somewhere to the radiator. As a result, it actually does not work well. So we recommend either this or that with the thermostat. It closes the fins, and also 100% of oil goes to the radiator, and it does not come back so uncooled to the engine. We talked about cooling the engine oil, and of course the gearbox also has its own oil and also its cooling. Here is a filter exactly the same as in the case of the engine. Additionally, a stand with hoses and a slightly smaller oil cooler hidden here in a tunnel, so that nothing happens to it there, so that it will not to be broken by any stone. Thanks to this, the gearbox really reaches maximum of 80 degrees when it comes to the oil temperature. Therefore, it will work undisturbed for a very long time. As I said, we have the water radiator in the back, but of course we have to connect it to the engine somehow, so that this fluid flows. I have such silicone hoses here. Next, there are aluminium tubes, because they are much more resistant to mechanical damage than, let's say, such silicone. I also had to make a whole tunnel in the floor panels here, to simply hide them so that they do not stick out below the floor level, because then it would be very easy to break them somewhere on some unevenness or when going off the track. So they are also quite strongly hidden here. Here we have silicone tubes, very nice with such metal armament. I will show them in a moment, but we just unscrew the bands in order to get rid of the fluid. Unfortunately, I cannot squeeze those hoses with such special pliers, so it does not leak. I will explain you to why in a minute. I am just loosening these bands. As you can see, the fluid is colorless. It is simply water, not normal coolant, because in general we are forbidden to use such standard fluid as they are slippery, especially those based on glycol. When there is a leak of such fluid somewhere on the track, it is difficult to get rid of it. And when the car drives on water, distilled of course, then we just need to dry it somewhere, this piece of track, and we can continue driving. As I talk about hoses, we have a water radiator in the back. Of course, we have to connect it somehow to the engine. We use such various silicone connectors to do it, or aluminium tubes, or both. It is known that if we have hoses, let's say 3 meters, we will not use such short pieces of silicone connected with bands every now and then, as each such connection may leak somewhere, and therefore we have aluminium tubes. We can weld them together, choose the right angles, flexions, diameters, so that it fits perfectly in the car. I personally try to use aluminium tubes because they dissipate heat much better than, for example, stainless steel or steel tubes in general. They are lighter than silicone ones, and thanks to that, we have even fewer connections. Interesting fact, the silicone tubes which we actually use, here you can see 5 such webbing braids. This is a serial rubber hose, the same as we have in normal cars, and here is only one. But due to the fact that there is only one braid here, and those hoses are quite soft, we do not have to, for example, drain all the fluid to replace a component in our car called a radiator or some valve or something else, because we can use very nice pliers, which will shut off the flow of water or fluid without, let's say, harm to this hose, to this rubber. This way we unfasten some element here, the water does not leak, there is no air trapped in the system. So it is very nice, very sensible solution. I have most of such hoses in my car. This is a hose with a metal spiral additionally, thanks to which it bends quite strongly and it does not break. Unfortunately, I cannot use these pliers on it, and as a consequence, I had to drain all the fluid. You probably wonder what are these elements, these two huge tubes. Well, at the time we had a slight problem with rubber, which bumped into the radiator when falling out of the tires. This rubber gradually clogged the radiator, so the car cooled down worse and worse. So we just made these two inlets from holes which are drilled, cut in the back of the car, in order to get fresh and clean air and not just so rubberized, dusty. Well, it helped us a bit, but it didn't solve the problem in 100%. We have to blow this radiator every once in a while. Well, but about that in a moment. Our radiator has to cope with this kind of dirt. These are the rubbish residues that settle everywhere. All of this fall into here. You can even see that still there is some of this, but definitely much less than before when we did not have this whole housing. This radiator has been with us for almost 2 years, as you can just see. It is not in perfect condition anymore. Surely some dirt stuck in it here, some scrap of rubber, dust, sand and so on. How to get rid of it? The easiest way, of course, is an ordinary blowing pistol. It is nice when it has such a plastic tip. Then when we will blow here, along these fins, we will not damage these tiny plates, we will not vent them. As a result, if all this falls, becomes flattened, the radiator would simply have worse flow, worse performance. So we are blowing, of course, in the right direction. If dirt got from the other side, we will not push it even deeper into these fins. We are just blowing from the other side, of course, to make it fall out in the direction that it came from. And successively, we just clean the fin after the fin. In addition, we can also take a thin screwdriver and straighten all these items. If the radiator is straight, not beaten or cracked, it will surely serve us well much longer. So we'll probably throw this one in as a service reserve. I think we will definitely put a new one for the next year. We'll also compare the water radiator. Here we have a serial one from a normal street car. Here we have a competitive radiator, which we use, for example, in our car. Well, of course, the first topic which can be seen is thickness. Here we are almost 5 centimeters. Here we have, I do not know, maybe 2.5. So this one is much thinner. Here we have aluminium tanks. They are very strong. Even that radiator, it will be hit somewhere. It will twist all over, bend, but it will not unseal. Here the tanks are made of plastic, both upper and lower. They can unseal. They can, of course, break on their own, simply of old age, or just like that. So it is not recommended in sports. And also the construction of the fins inside, so-called sots. Here we have such a radiator just cut. We just have one fin that is relatively wide. Here in this one, when we look inside, I will unscrew this cap in a moment. We have similar fins, but two. It is just thicker. It is also much better in terms of strength. There is also a larger surface of all these aluminium plates. It takes heat and cools down the liquid much better, and the car works better. With today's material, we finished a series of films in which I tried to introduce you to the construction and servicing of my Opel engine, gearbox, brake system or cooling system, just like today. And in fact, despite having a very strange and very unusual season, thanks to the fact that the car was trouble-free and thanks to the cooperation with Hoegert Technic brand, we won the title of Vice Champion of Poland. Of course, I will not say goodbye today. We are preparing much more materials for you. So please follow us, check our profiles, and I invite you to watch.